"Who is Jesus to you?" A child's voice asked this, and the whole hall froze. Not a general, not a priest, not a man with medals on his chest, just a little girl with a notebook clutched to her chest, 8 years old. Yet her question shattered the noise of politics. The empty promises, the lies we have been fed for generations. My brothers and sisters, do you feel the weight of those words? For centuries, Africa has been forced to bow. They gave us sermons but no bread, laws but no justice, chains instead of crowns. They said we could pray, but not rise. They built empires on our backs, then mocked us for being bent. And still, they told us to smile. But in that moment, a child's innocence struck harder than any weapon. She was not asking about power, or money, or war. She was asking about the soul, about love, about eternity. A question that undresses every leader, strips every title, and forces the truth into the light. Stay with us, because this isn't just another story. It's the future our ancestors dreamed of. Subscribe and join us for an Africa that no longer bows its head. The hall was alive, with noise before she rose. Chairs scraped against the floor. Voices collided in half-formed arguments. The hum of cameras buzzed like restless insects. Soldiers adjusted their rifles. Ministers whispered about security. Aides shuffled papers they did not need. It was the sound of every meeting in this wounded nation. Loud, impatient, cluttered with words that promised change, yet carried the same hollow echo. No one expected silence to fall that day. Du silence did come, and it came through a child. She stood no taller than the table before her. Her notebook looked too heavy for her small arms, its cover bent and frayed, its pages marked with childish handwriting, but her eyes steady, unblinking, carried a strength that even men in uniform could not hold. Her lips parted, and in a voice as soft as the breeze before a storm, she asked, "Who is Jesus to you?" The words did not echo, they stabbed. They tore through the hall, stripping away every speech rehearsed, every excuse prepared. Even the microphones seemed to tremble, unwilling to carry the sound of breathing. Those who moments earlier argued now stared at the floor. The cameras, eager to capture power, froze as if blind. In that moment, time slowed. Traore felt the weight before anyone else. This was not a question about policies, not about alliances or borders. It was not the kind of question a leader could answer with statistics or slogans. It was the kind of question that pierced deeper than politics, deeper than history. It went straight to the soul, and the silence that followed was not ordinary silence. It pressed down on the hall, thick as smoke. Women who had buried sons felt their throats tighten. Men who carried weapons looked away, suddenly unsure of their own strength. It was as though heaven itself leaned closer, waiting, demanding to hear the truth. My brothers and sisters, do you understand the danger of such a question? Because power can face rebels. It can crush armies. It can silence newspapers. But what it cannot fight is innocence. Innocence disarms power. Innocence exposes truth. That day, innocence stood in the body of a little girl and shook an entire nation. Traore's chest tightened. For years, he had carried the weight of command, speaking to crowds, rallying soldiers, defying foreign powers. He had worn his uniform like armor, his medals like proof. But in that instant, he felt them fall away. The child's question stripped him bare. Who are you when the lights are gone? Who are you when no one is watching? Who is Jesus to you? He looked at her small, fragile, trembling, yet he saw no fear in her. Her fingers clutched the notebook so tightly, her knuckles turned white. But her gaze was calm, almost relentless. She was not begging, not pleading. She was demanding, and in that demand was the voice of a continent, tired of lies, tired of hunger, tired of watching its leaders bow before foreign crowns. This was not about religion alone. It was about truth, about the measure of a man, when the banners fall and the trumpets fade. And in that instant, Traore saw what leadership really meant. It was not speeches or parades. It was not medals or titles. It was the ability to answer that question honestly, to show the people that behind the power stood a soul worth following, The hall remained still. The child's words hovered like fire, impossible to extinguish. Not a single cough, not a single shuffle, just silence, thick and sacred. Traore realized that revolutions are not always born in battles. Sometimes, they are born in questions. Questions so pure, they cut through centuries of oppression, exposing wounds the world had forgotten to heal. And so her voice lingered. Who is Jesus to you? Not to the church, not to the state, not to history, but to you, to the man in power, to the soldier with a gun, to the mother with tears in her eyes, to every soul in that hall. It was not just his test, it was theirs. It was ours. Traore had walked through fields where laughter had been burned away. He had seen homes turn to ash, the smoke still rising, as if the land itself was weeping. Children sat by the ruins of their villages, their eyes too hollow for their age, their cries too weak to carry. Mothers dug shallow graves for sons who had never reached manhood. These were not stories in a book. These were the sights etched into his mind, scars that would not fade. He remembered nights when the sky glowed red, not from sunsets, but from flames devouring the earth. The sound of boots on soil, the cries of the wounded, the silence of those who would never speak again. War, he realized, is not just the clash of armies. It is the slow death of innocence. It is the stench of bodies without names, the sound of rivers choking on blood. And in those nights, he asked himself, what is hope? What is light when the darkness is so heavy? What is love when hatred commands the guns? Then the name returned to him, Jesus. Not as a church ritual, not as a painting on a wall, but as a whisper cutting through the chaos. Jesus carried no sword, yet chains fell before him. He raised no armies, yet kingdoms trembled. He did not shout like generals, yet storms stilled at his voice. Traore clung to that thought in the midst of burning villages, because if hope was only a human promise, it would have died long ago. But Jesus offered a different kind of power, a power the world could not corrupt. Betrayal, however, was never far. Traore had seen men he once called brothers sell their honor for gold. Comrades who shared bread with him one night would abandon him the next for a seat at the table of foreign masters. He felt the sting of loyalty traded for titles, to have trust turned to dust. And in those moments, bitterness gnawed at his heart. Is loyalty a myth? Is love only a word whispered before war? Then he remembered. Jesus too had chosen 12. He had walked with them, taught them, washed their feet. Yet one betrayed him for silver. Another denied him 3 times before dawn. Still, Jesus did not curse them. He did not summon legions to destroy them. He forgave. He offered love, even as betrayal pressed a kiss on his cheek. Traore whispered to himself, who among us can love like that? Not I. Not the generals who lead armies. Not the kings who sit on thrones. But Jesus did, and that truth pierced him deeper than any wound. So when he thought of betrayal, he no longer saw only weakness. He saw proof that love can outlive treachery, proof that mercy can stand where judgment fails, proof that even when men break their word, God does not break his. In the battlefield of leadership, betrayal is a shadow that grows with every step. The closer you walk toward power, the longer it stretches behind you. Traore had learned this truth, and it weighed on him. But in the face of it, he saw Jesus not destroyed by betrayal, but defined by forgiveness. That, my brothers and sisters, is why he held on. He had seen villages burned, families broken, rivers of blood flow because of greed. Yet still, he believed, because Jesus showed that even the darkest night could not extinguish the smallest light. Even the deepest wound could not erase love. And so, standing before the people, Traore knew his answer would not be political. It would not be diplomatic. It would be human, because only truth survives the fire of betrayal. Only love endures when war ends. Traore had held the hands of dying men. He had felt the last breath slip like smoke between his fingers. He had watched eyes lose their light, soldiers staring at the sky as if searching for a tomorrow they would never see. Graves were dug so fresh that the earth still bled red. This was not a scene from old history. It was the reality of his land, the rhythm of war, beating against every village. Death always whispered the same lie. This is the end, the grave, the final word. And each time Traore stood at the edge of another burial, he felt the weight of that lie pressing down. It whispered into his bones. All is lost. But then came the name Jesus, a name that defied death's arrogance. He remembered the story. Jesus stood at the tomb of Lazarus, the stench of decay heavy in the air, the mourners certain it was over. Yet he called, "Lazarus, come forth." And the dead man walked. Traore knew this was no children's tale. It was a promise, a declaration that death's teeth could be broken. And Jesus himself had tasted death. He had been sealed in a tomb, guarded by soldiers, forgotten by the world. But on the third day, the stone rolled away. Death, the enemy no man could defeat, was defeated. That truth struck Traore's heart like thunder. If Jesus could rise, then death is not the master. If Jesus could walk out of the grave, then despair has no throne. He looked at his land, at Africa, scarred by centuries of slavery, drained by empires, scarred by poverty, and yet, he saw in Jesus a reflection. Africa, too, had been buried in chains, dismissed as dead. But just as the stone could not hold Jesus, the chains would not hold Africa. My brothers and sisters, this is why we fight. Not because we believe death has the last word, but because we believe in resurrection. Every child crying in hunger, every village burned, every son buried too young, none of it will have the final say. Jesus turned mourning into dancing, graves into gardens, despair into hope. Traore thought of the mothers he had met, mothers who whispered prayers over lifeless sons, who asked, "Why?" with voices trembling like broken glass. He wanted to tell them, your tears are not the end. Your grief is not the last chapter, because Jesus proved that the grave is not a wall, but a doorway. That promise, brothers and sisters, is not theory. It is fuel. It is why, even after war, people rebuild. Why, after betrayal, we dare to trust again. Why, after centuries of oppression, Africa still rises. Because hope, born in Jesus, cannot be buried. And so Traore, facing that child's question, he thought of death, but he also thought of life. He thought of soldiers who died believing in a better tomorrow. He thought of nations buried under the weight of foreign chains. And he thought of Jesus saying, "I am the resurrection and the life." Those words were not whispers of comfort. They were a challenge to despair. If Jesus broke death, then Africa's story is not finished. No empire can write our ending. No grave can hold our future. And so I say to you, brothers and sisters, if you believe this is what Africa needed all along, say amen in the comments below. Let the world know that death does not decide our destiny. Hope does. And that hope has a name. Jesus. Africa, the mother of kingdoms, the land of gold, diamonds, and fertile soil, was turned into a beggar. The world bled her dry, stripped her pride, and mocked her for the scars it had carved. Fields rich enough to feed nations were left barren, so foreign markets could profit. Rivers wide as oceans were poisoned. Forests, ancient as time, were devoured. And still the world said, Africa is poor. They stole, and then blamed us for being robbed. Traore knew this history well. His own nation, Burkina Faso, was dismissed as landlocked, forgotten, dependent. Yet, beneath its soil lay riches, and in its people, a spirit no empire could extinguish. He remembered the endless reports, the labels written by foreign hands, unstable, underdeveloped, incapable. They wanted Africa to believe those lies, to bow and beg for aid that came chained with conditions. But Traore also knew another story. Jesus, too, was born far from palaces, not in marble halls, not in the shadow of empires, but in a stable, wrapped not in silk but in rough cloth. His first companions were not kings, but shepherds. He did not dine with the mighty. He walked with fishermen, with the poor, with the rejected. He showed the world that worth is not counted in gold or crowns, but in love. My brothers and sisters, Do you see the parallel? Jesus' life tells us something. Africa has always known, but the world refuses to admit. Dignity is not given by the oppressor. It is born in the soul of the oppressed. They told us we were slaves, but Jesus told us we are free. They said we were forgotten, but Jesus showed that the last shall be first. And yet, look around. This world worships greed as though it were God. Corporations feed on hunger, like vultures on corpses. They destroy forests for profit, poison rivers for power, and trade human lives like commodities. Nations wage war, not for peace, but for resources. They build monuments to money and call it civilization. But Jesus said, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" Africa has been forced to watch as others gained, while she was told to lose her soul, her culture, her freedom. And still, the heartbeat of Africa survives. Traore stood before his people and knew he had to name this truth. He had to say what history books will not, that Africa is not poor. Africa is plundered. That Burkina Faso is not dependent. It is defiant. And that the story of Jesus, born in humility, yet crowned with eternity, is the mirror of Africa's story. Captain Ibrahim. Latest news shows a leader refusing to bow, choosing instead to lift his nation from the dust. Burkina Faso. Latest news speaks of canals being built, of farmers reclaiming their land, of people daring to dream again. This is no accident. It is prophecy unfolding in real time. Jesus walked dusty roads with bare feet, lifting the forgotten. Africa walks those same dusty roads now. Yet with each step she rises. Jesus told the poor they were blessed. Africa, mocked for her poverty, carries the same blessing. And just as Jesus turned tables in the temple, Africa too will turn the tables on those who exploited her. The world may sneer, they may spread lies, they may threaten sanctions and send soldiers, but they cannot erase truth. They cannot silence a people who know their worth. They cannot chain a continent that has finally remembered who it is. So let us be clear. Jesus to Africa is not a symbol of weakness. He is the proof that the forgotten are chosen, that the oppressed will rise, and that no empire lasts forever. Africa's story is not over. It is only beginning. Crowns glitter for a season, then rust. Thrones rise on the backs of the poor, then crumble into dust. Empires roar with banners and drums, then vanish into the footnotes of history. Traore had studied the Romans who built roads that still stand, but whose Senate halls are silent. He had read of the Persians, once stretching across deserts and mountains, now reduced to ruins beneath the sand. He thought of the great dynasties of Asia, of pharaohs in Egypt, who commanded slaves to build pyramids, so their names would echo forever. And yet, today, tourists walk their tombs as if flipping through pages of a forgotten story. Every empire declared it would last forever. Every crown believed it was untouchable, but all of them cracked, all of them fell. And yet, through centuries, one name refuses to fade. Jesus. His name has outlived kings, conquered more hearts than armies, and carried more power than gold. Why? Because his kingdom was not built on fear. It was built on love. My brothers and sisters, love does not rust. Love does not crumble. Love does not. Traore, standing before his people, felt this truth burning in his chest. He realized greatness is not measured by how many kneel before you, but by how many you lift up. Jesus wore no golden crown. He wore a crown of thorns. He commanded no armies of steel, but the loyalty of souls across centuries. He built no palaces, but he built hope that empires could not destroy. This, Traore told himself, is leadership. Not ruling over others, but serving them, not demanding loyalty, but giving love. He remembered the night Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. Kings of this world sit high so no one can touch them. Jesus knelt low so no one would be left behind. What kind of power is that? It is not the power of domination. It is the power of love. Traore compared this to his own land. Burkina Faso had been ruled by leaders who bowed to foreign masters, building palaces for themselves while the people starved. They clung to power with fear. They measured success by how many bowed before them. But Traore saw another way. a way where the leader does not demand service, but serves, where greatness is not in crowns, but in calloused hands, willing to work for the people. Today's rulers build walls to keep people out. Jesus broke walls to bring people in. Today's leaders cling to power with violence. Jesus gave up his life with love. Every empire that ruled by fear fell, but Jesus, who ruled by love, still reigns in hearts. Traore looked at the faces in the hall: farmers, soldiers, mothers, elders. They were not asking for riches. They were asking for dignity. And he knew he had to tell them the truth. Crowns will break when heads fall. Palaces will turn to ruins. Armies will become bones beneath the earth. But love, real love, will outlive them all. And so, Traore spoke with fire. Do not chase crowns. Do not worship empires. Build your life on love, because love cannot die. He told them stories they already knew, of kings who built monuments so tall they touched the clouds, now nothing but rubble, of corporations today that believe their wealth can buy eternity. Yet one day, their towers will crumble into dust. He told them of tyrants who believed fear could control nations. But fear always breaks when love rises. For the first time, the people in the hall did not hear a politician. They heard a servant, a man stripped of titles, speaking not of policies but of truth. They realized that the true strength of a leader is not in the power he holds, but in the love he refuses to let die. And Traore declared it clearly. Jesus is that love. And because love does not die, Africa will not die. Because love cannot be buried. Our future cannot be buried. Because love is eternal. Our story is eternal. Brothers and sisters, the world may kill prophets, silence truth-tellers, bury leaders, but it cannot kill love. Love rises again, just as Jesus did, and that is why, even as crowns fall and empires fade, Africa must hold to love. Because if we build our future on fear, it will collapse. But if we build it on love, it will endure. Brothers and sisters, we have walked through the silence of a child's question, through the fire of war, through betrayal, through graves, and through hope. And what have we found? That crowns crack, empires collapse, and thrones gather dust. But one truth cannot die. Jesus is love, and love never loses. Africa knows this better than most. For centuries, she was stripped, chained, mocked. They told us to kneel, to beg, to wait for freedom. But love kept us alive. Love carried us through the ships of slavery, through the plantations, through the hunger, through the wars. Love, not power, not money, is what kept our people standing. And today, as the world watches, Burkina Faso, latest news tells a story not of defeat, but of renewal. Captain Ibrahim. Latest news is not about a man chasing crowns. It is about a servant lifting his people. The headlines may try to twist it, but history will remember. Love is stronger than fear. This is why we must speak together. Write in the comments. The cry of our ancestors. New Africa. Africa rise. Africa can do it. It's time for Africa, because if we do not claim our story, others will. If we do not speak our truth, others will bury it. Captain Ibrahim. Latest news reminds us that leadership is not about palaces, but about sacrifice. It is not about ruling over the people, but serving them, and that, my brothers and sisters, is the way of Jesus. So I say to you, if this story moved something in your chest, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak, subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. Let's speak our future out loud. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story, the kind they still don't want you to hear.